Here's Bob Trumpy.
Thank you, and welcome back to Sports Talk here on WLW. We head towards 9 o'clock. Bear with us here for a little bit. We're going to have election returns all evening for you. Bill Ridenauer and our crack news staff all around the greater Cincinnati area and northern Kentucky area. And at just after the news on each hour, and then at about 7:40 and 8:40, we'll keep you as up to date as possible. And in the meantime, we'll have Sports Talk here for you. We are going to deal with a subject that came up a few weeks ago. I want to first of all welcome to the program a gentleman named Peter King, who writes for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Pete, welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
I understand you've got back problems, but you are biting the bullet, as they say.
My back is coming back.
Playing with pain. You are here to talk about it.
Yeah, first of all, Bob, congratulations to the Illini.
Thank you very much.
Playing good ball.
Yes, they are. All of those junior college transfers, and don't try to make friends with me, all of those junior college transfers are finally paying off for Mike White and Chip Myers. The reason Peter King is here, I can't believe that you don't know about this, but there has been a big matter that has taken place here in Cincinnati concerning Ohio State, possibly Notre Dame, and the fact that Gerry Faust, as the former coach of Moeller, may have in fact violated NCAA recruiting regulations by appearing in front of his former team, the Moeller High School Crusaders, when he was down here to sign autographs of a book. He made a trip into the locker room, and somehow this thing began as an anthill and has turned out to be a mountain. It first appeared here in Cincinnati apparently on October 14th. No, make it October 24th. Both papers at that point had a story. In the Enquirer, it was Faust Pep Talk Possible Violation, written by the Enquirer staff. By the Cincinnati Post, Talk Could Mean Problems by Bob Queenan, Post staff reporter. Both appeared on the same day. And out of that came subsequent articles trying to find out if, in fact, Ohio State, as was reported by Irv Kupcinet and the Chicago, Sun-Times? Yeah. Who is somewhat of a gossip columnist and not one of the more reputable reporters that you can come in contact with when it comes to whether or not he was there, or they are meeting, or they are about to be married, or coming down to a divorce. That announcement was made. Then there was another article that appeared in the Cincinnati Post with the headline, Faust Thrown in NCAA Pressure Cooker. There was an article that appeared by Dick Forbes under the headline of, what, Peter, if you will?
You mean before that?
Yeah.
I don't know, I only got the second line of it. It's something like anybody could survive Big Ten race, something like that.
Oh, I see. And in that comment was the trip that Dick Forbes made to Columbus to question Earl Bruce as to whether or not Ohio State, or anybody at Ohio State, it was named Fred Zeckman, had turned in Notre Dame and Gerry Faust to the NCAA. That's what the basis of the article was. Out of that came an article that appeared last Sunday. Suggestion to Earl Bruce by Peter King, check facts before accusing. And this kind of puts together from Friday, October 23rd, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and then the article as to just how things have all set up. One of the things involved in this article was our conversation with Earl Bruce on the program. But and there's some pretty strong language, as far as I'm concerned, in this article dealing with our Sports Talk program. That somehow we missed the point of this entire thing. When I said it's not our responsibility to get the Enquirer out of trouble, and Mr. King says it's not the point. The point is you didn't do your homework before the Bruce interview. If you had, you wouldn't have said the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever. What story? Question mark. What lack of documentation? Question mark. I wanted the same thing. The entire thing started out as I see it, and I don't write for a newspaper and know very little about newspaper writing, but I believe the first article that appeared in the Cincinnati Enquirer with a byline, the Enquirer staff kind of started it off on the wrong foot. If I'm not mistaken now, let me try to retrace exactly what happened here. And I agree with most of what you say in your article. Bob Queenan called Gerry Faust Friday afternoon, just prior to, was it the USC game? Yeah, it had to be the USC game. Gerry Faust, and asked Gerry Faust about, did he realize that it might be a possible recruiting violation to have appeared in front of the Moeller High School football team. Gerry apparently exclaimed, gee, I didn't know that, and went to a press reception the night before the USC game, where Randy Holtz, who is a writer for the Cincinnati Enquirer, was in attendance. And apparently Gerry went to Randy Holtz and said, gee, we might be in trouble, so on and so forth, about this recruiting thing and appearing before the team. That prompted Randy Holtz to call the Cincinnati Enquirer, and then things began from there. When I got out of the first article that you gentlemen wrote, was that because it's under the byline of Enquirer staff, I get the feeling that 5, 6, maybe 7, maybe 2, maybe 3, more than one person were sitting in the Enquirer sports room, and someone said, well, let's check on it. You make a couple of phone calls, I'll make a couple of phone calls, let's see what we can put together. The first line of this article, I believe, is absolutely shameful by the Cincinnati Enquirer. Gerry Faust, Notre Dame's rookie football coach, apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule last week when he gave a locker room pep talk to the Moeller High School team. If you don't read anything past that, you think, my God, Gerry Faust has just broken one of the cardinal sins of recruiting. But in the same article, 4 paragraphs later, it appears to me that someone else is doing the writing. Someone else has found out some other information, and that is, right at the bottom of the page, entering a high school locker room, however, is apparently tantamount to a contact, not a violation as stated in the first paragraph, but a contact.
Well, a contact can be a violation.
All right, I'll give you that. The NCAA term for personal communication between college coaches and high school recruits, and contacts are not permitted at this time of the year. There's a new rule that says past August 1st you can't do that. It must be it's no between August 1st and December 1st. But the next paragraph, going into a locker room is not an NCAA violation, said Hal McKemmenon, Assistant Director of the NCAA's Enforcement Division. But doing that probably would be a contact with an athlete if it were deemed personal. Then later on, the NCAA's Director of Enforcement, David Burst, would not comment on whether Faust's action had been reported to the NCAA by a member of school. There wouldn't be any way we could comment on something of that nature. Peter, I repeat, am I correct that someone calls from South Bend, Indiana, late on a Friday evening, and I don't imagine there are hundreds of people around the Cincinnati Enquirer at 9 or 9:30 at night, or am I wrong?
Well, he called about, I'd say he called about 7. You know,
all right,
in general.
How many people are in the sports department about 7 o'clock on a Friday evening?
Say 8.
And why wasn't, if there were 8 people there, why wasn't one person assigned to delve into the story? I have a feeling that maybe the reason...
Well, just because at that time, for example, Cindy Morris was working on her UC story for the next day. I was working on making phone calls for my column on Sunday. Who else was there? Mike Palercio. No, he wasn't there, I don't think. Well, one of the high school guys were there. They were getting ready to go out to a game or getting ready to coordinate the coverage inside.
Would a high school guy be given an assignment to make a few phone calls on this situation? Or
hey, he might, but not on that night because he was too busy. He was probably going to leave the office soon.
Okay.
See, what happened is, at that time of night, there are, I don't know if this is even relevant, but at that time of night, everyone is doing their own thing, more or less. And what you have to do is take whoever you can get. Like, as I recall, Lonnie Wheeler wrote the story after getting input from, I think Cindy called Mike McGee and Mike Gottfried. Dick Forbes tried to call people at Ohio State. Somebody called somebody at Michigan, Don Canham, the athletic director, I think. And what it is basically is a team thing.
Yes.
I mean, you know.
Yes. Agreed. But when it says in the first paragraph, apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule, and then in the subsequent paragraph says it's not a violation to go, an NCAA violation to go in the locker room.
It's not a violation, apparently, to go into a locker room, but it might be a violation to give a pep talk.
Might.
Right.
And you called the NCAA, and Mr. McKenham.
Well, he says, as you can see right here, he says, you know, going into the locker room is not an NCAA violation. But doing that, and I think probably after that, in parentheses, should have been speaking to the team, but doing that would probably be contact with an athlete.
What do you mean should have been?
Pardon me?
What do you mean should have been?
Well, I assume what Lonnie means, or what Lonnie means
How can
in
we
here is
assume?
by doing that, talking to the athletes would probably be contact with an athlete.
Yeah, I suppose that when the inquiry was made to the NCAA, it was assumed that there was some personal contact between Gerry Faust and the players, as opposed to just standing up in front of them and saying, thanks a lot for dedicating the game to me, and so on and so forth. But we're getting off my point.
Yeah.
My point is, if at the point on this October 24th evening at 7 o'clock, it is not paramount that one person all of a sudden drop everything he's doing and pay particular attention to this situation, and then later on there was so much attention paid to this, I wonder what in fact is going on. My own opinion is that because of the call by Bob Queenan from the Cincinnati Post, I believe that prompted the people at the Enquirer to understand that Bob Queenan was probably going to have a story in the Morning Post. We got to have something too. And in the result, I think the Enquirer did a very poor job and really made a very small thing and something that Earl Bruce has had to answer to, that we have had to answer to for whatever reason, that you have had to answer to, that Notre Dame has had to answer to, and the NCAA has had to answer to.
Well, in the first place, I don't know if Randy found out from having Bob Queenan call Gerry. It's possible. Gerry told Randy evidently that it was a reporter. That's what Randy said. And afterwards,
knowing Gerry from being from Cincinnati, I seriously doubt if he would go to Randy Holtz, a guy he's known for a long time, and Bob Queenan he's known for a long time, without saying, hey, Bob Queenan called me from Cincinnati and this may be a violation. I kind of doubt that.
I mean, I don't know. It's possible. But, you know, all we're saying here, you know, no matter where we find out the information from, you know, we find out on Wednesday we're going to do the story for Thursday. We find out on Monday we're going to do it for Tuesday. We didn't do this to counter something that the Post was going to do. We did this because it's a story. It's a possible violation. And, you know, any suggestion...
Well, but now wait a minute. Peter, one of the responsibilities I believe a paper has is there's supposed to be as little assumption on the paper's part as possible. It seems to me that of all the people that you called, why in the world wasn't Gerry Faust talked to? Why didn't, before anybody called the NCAA, why didn't somebody call Gerry Faust and say, Gerry, what did you do?
We have Gerry Faust quotes in this story. He says, all I did was go into the Moeller locker room and give a pep talk. He's the first person quoted in this story.
Okay. Was that relayed to the people at the NCAA? There's no mention of the fact
I didn't talk to the NCAA, so I didn't work on the story, so I don't know what they relayed.
Would you have expected them to relate that to the NCAA? It seems to me that you're assuming, or the Enquirer is assuming a great deal, that Gerry Faust had personal contact by walking into the locker room.
No, all we're saying is, okay, I'll give you a facsimile of the phone call. Dial a number. Hello, NCAA. Hello, Mr. Burst there. Yeah, this is Mr. Burst.
I thought you didn't work on the story.
I didn't. I'm just giving you a facsimile of what might have happened. All right, what the phone call might have been.
Okay.
And whoever you know, made the phone call probably said something to the effect, Mr. Burst, we're just curious to find out if Gerry Faust's talk to his Moeller High School team in the locker room last Friday night is an NCAA violation, seeing that there is a no contact period until, I believe, December 1st. Is this a violation? See, I think the whole point, you know, possibly the story is overplayed. I don't think so.
Possibly?
You know, possibly it is, but I said I don't think so. It isn't. I don't think it's overplayed because an NCAA violation, no matter how minor, could get a team into hot water. I mean, Gerry Faust, they could say to him, all right, Gerry, that was an illegal contact. We're going to slap you with no TV for 1982. Or we're going to slap you with no... I don't think they'd take away a bowl game, but they might hit him with some minor penalty.
You are assuming, of course, now after that phone call with Mr. Burst, that they were in fact going to be turned in, which in fact they were not, by anyone, except the Cincinnati Enquirer, who
It's not our job to ask them if they turn this in, or see, if we find out, it doesn't matter who turns someone in. If we find out, we should call. You know, I cover Xavier. If I found out that Bob Stack had given a Cadillac to Tony Hicks, the star guard, you know, I would go to the NCAA and I'd say, hey, Bob Stack gave Tony Hicks a Cadillac. That's an NCAA violation, isn't it? I wouldn't wait for someone to report it. I can report it just like a university can report it.
Well, I suppose that is true, but you are you have the hard fact that Tony Hicks is driving around a Cadillac and it's got Bob Stack's name on the registration card. You are still assuming a great deal when this article was first written, that in fact Gerry Faust had personal contact, that he had no knowledge of...
no, we're not saying he had personal contact. We're saying that he gave a pep talk. That's all we said. We did not say in this story or in any subsequent story that Faust had personal contact with any player.
Okay, all right, but let's move on. After it moves from the staff trying to assemble this story, I still believe, even though you contend it's not true, I still believe to counter a story written on the same subject in the afternoon newspaper by Bob Queenan, after that, tip to NCAA on Faust talk not from another school. This is October 29th now.
Mm-hmm.
You got that one?
We've already established that. I mean, I don't see that it's any big deal who turns somebody in, a school or a newspaper or is somebody off the street. I'll give you an example.
That's your personal opinion, but why did Ohio State and Earl Bruce have to answer for this? So
no,
it is
all
a big
they
deal.
have to,
It is a big
Mike
deal.
Gottfried and Mike McGee had to answer to it, but that doesn't mean they had anything to do with it.
Same is true of Ohio State.
True. Same's true of Kentucky, Miami, everybody. But see, the thing is, when you're a reporter, you got to check out, if you hear a rumor that, hey, we heard Ohio State turned him in, or we heard that Indiana turned him in, we heard Corso turned him in, well, we got to call Corso, and we have to call the AD at Indiana to check out these rumors.
But, Peter, my question is, when you hear a rumor, does that immediately signify that the Cincinnati Enquirer is now in full gear? We got to check out the rumor? Aren't there times when you have to judge the source of that rumor, that information, as to whether or not it's worthy of a phone call? I mean, any time that you call, Joe the barber can say, "Hey, I heard Ohio State turned in Notre Dame." By your ethics, you're going to call Notre Dame, or you're going to call Ohio State, see if they turn them in. I think that's putting undue pressure on Ohio State. I don't believe that's responsible reporting.
All we're doing is asking them a simple question.
By the fact that you're there to ask them, and that they must answer, there was a certain amount of prejudice that will be against that school, or there's a certain amount of guilt just with the fact that you're asking them.
UC has been asked. Kentucky has been asked. Ohio State has been
absolutely
asked. Let me say one thing. When Randy came back from Notre Dame on Monday, he came into the office, and he had heard the Irv Kupcinet rumor that Ohio State had turned him in. And so what Randy did was he called up a bunch of people he knows at Notre Dame. He called a couple of, I don't know who else he called. He called several people. And by mid-afternoon he said, I just don't think we should run a story. I can't substantiate everything. See, there's no harm in asking the questions. I mean, we would be irresponsible if we did not ask the questions.
I think you're irresponsible in taking every rumor and demanding a question from the local schools.
Well,
because no one turned them in. If the NCAA says on the night that you ran the initial story, you're the first person we've heard about anything pertaining to this situation.
Well, they didn't say that, so naturally then we have to check out who else might have done it. On the first night, we didn't know this. See, we didn't know this until Thursday.
No, in the initial article, the 24th. The NCAA's Director of Enforcement, S. David Burst, would not comment on whether Faust action had been reported to the NCAA by a member of school. There wouldn't be any way we could comment on something of that nature. You take it by the fact that he made no comment that they probably were turned in.
No, we don't. We just take it as if we have to check that out. What is the harm? I fail to see what the harm is in asking someone a question.
All right.
I do it all the time.
All right. Let me paint you a scenario.
All right.
This is you gave me a supposed phone call. Let me paint you this scenario. SQ Dotson burned down last night.
Mm-hmm.
If I am a reporter by your ethics, if I'm a reporter from the Cincinnati Enquirer, what if I go to you and say, Peter King, we want to know your involvement possibly in the SQ Dotson fire? And you say, why are you asking me? I know nothing about it. There was a certain amount of guilt with the association of the question alone.
Why would
That's my point.
Why would you ask me?
Why not? Why would you ask Ohio State? Why would you ask Michigan, Indiana, University of Cincinnati, or Kentucky on this situation? You had not established, first of all, that Notre Dame had been turned in.
No.
Why the inquiries to these local schools?
Because we assumed at this point, at the point of the first story, that there is a possible violation. So we want to find out if the NCAA knows anything about it, if anyone, turned them in. And when they say no comment to who turned them in, that is a part of the story. It's a part of the story to see who turned Gerry Faust
Sure.
in, if anyone.
But unfortunately, that no comment is as much a comment as obviously they're hiding something. There's somebody, but we're not going to find out who it is. I mean, the reason I go to you as an Enquirer reporter on the SQ Datsun Fire is that I know you smoke, or you used to smoke, therefore you use matches. Why shouldn't I ask you? I think it's as feeble a line for the SQ Datsun Fire as it is for the NCAA. Anytime somebody has to answer to your question as to whether or not you turned them in, they turned them in, we turned them in, that is I believe, putting a college football program up to the identification by anybody in the area that they may have in fact turned them in. And then all of a sudden that department has to turn around and alleviate or take away any possible bad press that they might get. I think that's absolutely unconscionable by a newspaper.
Well,
do you not see what the point I'm trying to make?
I see what you're saying, Bob, but, you know, in my mind, I ask idiotic questions every day. You know, I might come in and ask you, hey, Bob, did you sign a $100,000 contract with NBC? And obviously you're not going to tell me, but I'm a reporter. I have to ask the questions. We have to assume that the NCAA has found out in some way of Notre Dame's violations. How can you make that assumption?
How can you make that assumption?
What assumption?
That Notre Dame has in fact committed some sort of violation. To this point,
no,
there is no declaration by the
NCAA. It's possible violation.
It is today, November 3rd, 1981. This first article appeared October 24th. There is to this point no declaration by the NCAA, Notre Dame, or anybody that there's been any violation or that they were turned in.
True, but it is a possible violation. We have to check these out. Bob, you know, it's just like I told you, the Xavier example. I mean, if something happens, we're reporters. We have to check it out. You know, that's why does it prejudice someone to ask them a question about it?
Peter, you have to draw the line somewhere between a rumor at a cocktail party, and it was reported to Earl Bruce.
How do you know that this is a rumor at a cocktail party?
I'm going by one of your.
That's what Earl Bruce said on the telephone.
That's what he said on the program. That the reporter came up there and questioned him on it, and Earl Bruce said, "Where did you get that?" And the reporter, who apparently was Dick Forbes, who goes up there to partake of Earl Bruce's press conference, stated, "We got it from the girlfriend of one of the people on our staff."
Well, I asked my sports editor, John Gibson, about that before I left, and he didn't know about it. I don't know about that. You know, it may be true. I just don't know about it.
Well, why wasn't that reported? And why wasn't Holtz covering the story as opposed to Dick Forbes?
Well, he's in Notre Dame. I mean, he doesn't have the phone numbers of the NCAA. He's at a party. He calls us from the party. Well, I think we're getting off the track here. I mean, the whole point of the matter is...
Actually, I think we are directly on track, that there has to be a point where a newspaper can go on only so many rumors that, that justify a comment.
Okay, Bob, if you notice in the first story, Ohio State is not even mentioned in the first story.
So what?
They are not mentioned. They were not called.
Whoa. What? They were called, but there was nobody that could be reached.
Right. Okay, yeah. They were not reached. They are not in the story. You know, I can't understand why someone would be upset with this story who goes to Ohio State, this first story. It boggles my mind.
I don't believe anybody was. I honestly don't believe at that point anybody was worried at all. The subsequent stories, I believe, are the ones that really upset a great many people.
They don't seem to have upset anybody from UC, or they don't seem to have upset anybody from Michigan or Kentucky. Why is Ohio State upset?
Probably because they were the only ones that were not reached, and that, above all else, is their biggest sin so far.
We only reached two schools here. We reached UC and Michigan. Couldn't get anybody at the other schools.
What other schools?
I don't know who else they called. I assume they called Kentucky, Ohio State. I doubt Indiana. They don't recruit that heavily here.
Well, but still, the one school that was mentioned in the article, the first article, that was stated, there was no comment from Ohio State because such and such was unavailable. You put them in the story.
No, they are not in here. That is not in the story. Ohio State is not mentioned in the first story. They are not mentioned. We do not say they could not be reached for comment.
Okay. How about later on, the other articles that appear?
Well, the other articles in our paper all came following the rumor published in Chicago. when something like that is published in a major metropolitan newspaper. It's like when Jimmy Carter, if you take it this far, if Jimmy Carter supposedly bugged somebody, sure, it sounds silly, but if you're responsible, you can't just say, I don't believe that happened. You have to call Jimmy Carter or his aides and say, is this possible, and get a comment from him.
But there has to be a point where these rumors and the Washington Post, they took back everything they said about it. They said it was irresponsible. They didn't like to put it there to begin with. So the paper was in fact wrong by printing that rumor. Peter, my point is,
we did not print a rumor. If you notice in any of these stories, we did not print a rumor.
You most certainly did.
Where?
The first line of the first article you wrote. That's not a rumor. That's not a rumor?
Gerry Faust apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule last week when he gave a locker room pep talk to Moeller High School.
What is the basis? What is the basis for that fact?
He gave a pep talk to Moeller High School. That is a fact.
But
he admits giving the pep talk.
But the man from the NCAA says, no. Going into a locker room is not an NCAA violation.
And he also says,
but doing that would probably be a contact
with an athlete.
Would probably. You're saying in the first, apparently, he's saying probably. There's no substantiation to either one of those.
If you notice in the paragraph after, but doing that would probably be contact with an athlete, he says, that means a college, right now we are in an evaluation period, that means a college coach can go to a school and evaluate an athlete by talking to his coach or looking to films or whatever, but he cannot make a contact. Now, Gerry Faust spoke to a room full of kids. Now the question is, I guess, is that a contact? All right.
You're I believe, interpreting the rules of the NCAA. The man from the NCAA, as I read it, and I'm looking on the other side. The man from the NCAA says it's a contact, yes, which and Earl Bruce admitted in subsequent articles. All he'll get is an official reprimand. He didn't corner anybody and say, hey, I want you to come to Notre Dame. You are assuming that there was personal contact between Gerry Faust and everybody else.
We're not assuming anything. We are just pointing out that apparently it was a violation, even to give a pep talk. Personal contact aside, talking to 60 players or however many people Moeller suits up is talking to players. Where the gray area comes in is whether talking to a group of people is different than talking to one person.
Then I wonder how the Cincinnati Enquirer can set themselves up as the judge of that, whether it's right or wrong. Because you say apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule. That's the first paragraph. Why wasn't the first paragraph of this of this article? First of all, the comments by the NCAA saying that going into the locker room is not an NCAA violation. Well, we got a break here because we got to go to our next voting report. Hopefully we're not boring you with this. We want your response to this. Let's understand it this way. We sit here every night. Peter King writes articles on us. Well, eventually, you and Cincinnati are going to get a chance to judge Peter King in the Cincinnati Enquirer. That's the idea of Sports Talk, and we'll continue after these important messages. Sports Talk here on WLW with Peter King of the Cincinnati Enquirer. Let's get through the rest of the stuff to the article that appeared on Sunday, if you don't mind. A suggestion to Earl Bruce, check facts before accusing. I honestly believe, and I'm sure that you will correct me if you think that I'm wrong, that Earl Bruce did more checking than you guys did.
Checking on what?
Well, on just the basis for the story, there was a part in here that you assume when Earl Bruce is on our program last Wednesday evening, that he mentioned the Cincinnati Enquirer. He only did it to make a point of trying to inform everybody that the NCAA first found out about it through the Cincinnati Enquirer clipping section. And then it goes on to say they said they got the news from the Cincinnati Enquirer clipping section and that Ohio State or no one with Ohio State has ever turned them in. Previous to that, it says we're under some heat in Cincinnati, and I don't quite understand it. Why are you defending this supposed situation when nobody at Ohio State has really taken you on?
Well, I disagree. I think that Earl Bruce made reference several times to the fact that the Enquirer had printed that Ohio State turned in. That Ohio State had turned in Faust, when in fact that the Enquirer never turned in Ohio State. They were simply checking out a story.
Just above that in the same article, it says that Bruce explained the Buckeye side of the incident and was critical of the Enquirer's reporting. He said the paper got its report from a girlfriend of one of the editors. Is that not, in fact, exactly the truth? Did not Dick Forbes go there and say that it was from a girlfriend?
Again, I don't know. I haven't talked to Dick Forbes.
Why wasn't that in there then?
Well, because Earl Bruce said it. And all I am doing right here is writing down exactly what has happened. I'm not getting into explanatory references here as to what exactly happened and how he found out this information, how he didn't.
Don't you have to substantiate this guy that Earl Bruce is taking on if, in fact, Dick Forbes went up there and said, Earl, the report we got is coming from a girlfriend of one of the people on our staff? Isn't that part of trying to lay the groundwork to exactly what happened day by day?
Well, see, as I see, and as I told you, I have asked John Gibson about the report of the girlfriend of one of the editors, and he doesn't know what Bruce is talking about. You know, he does not know what girlfriend of what editor that they're talking about. You know, that's what John told me.
Could it be, is Randy Holtz married?
Yeah.
Could it have been his wife as opposed to his girlfriend?
I imagine she was in Cincinnati. I don't know if she travels.
Seems to me there are a great many...
well, Randy's not an editor anyway.
Well, but does Earl... I don't know who's an editor at the Enquirer either.
Well, let's see. All the editors at the Enquirer in the sports department are married.
Peter, the point I'm trying to make is there seem to be a great many holes in what we're talking about here.
Tell me the holes.
Well, first of all, the Enquirer side of the story is that he said he got the paper got its report from a girlfriend of one of the editors. It seems to me that for pure credibility, the Enquirer would certainly try to find out exactly where this started and to substantiate whether or not it was Gerry Faust who first of all told Randy Holtz who called you, or if in fact it was the girlfriend of an editor. That seems to me.
Well, see, I asked the sports editor at our paper, who I asked several questions about this story to before writing it, and he doesn't know what they're talking about.
All right, let me put it this way: if at this point Dick Forbes goes to the press conference by Earl Bruce in Columbus and he states it's the girlfriend of an editor, how can he possibly get that information if apparently the first guy to inform you guys was Randy Holtz? I mean, there is a wide disparity there in description of the guy who started it.
I don't know that Dick Forbes said that.
Why don't you know that?
Like I said, I didn't call every reporter who ever had anything to do with this.
Why not, Peter?
I asked John Gibson, I asked Randy Holtz. Forbes was at Purdue on Friday night.
Peter, at the end of the article, you say the Enquirer never gets us out of, or I said Trumpy says the Enquirer never gets us out of trouble. Not the point, Bob. The point is you didn't do your homework before the Bruce interview. If you had, you wouldn't have said the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever. What homework have you done?
I think I did quite a lot of homework.
I don't see it.
Well, you
didn't call Dick Forbes to find out if he in fact told Earl Bruce that it was the girlfriend of a girlfriend of one of the editors.
Or Dick Forbes not being available on Friday, I asked the sports editor, who apparently should know what Dick Forbes is doing.
And everything that he says, we got a lot of apparently and suppose and so on and so forth. Peter, what I'm saying is...
Where's apparently and suppose in this story?
This story?
Yeah, this story. Bob, let me make one point before we go on. I'd just like to make one point. My point here is that Earl Bruce, in his conversation with you last Wednesday, said some things that were not true.
He made no specific reference to the Cincinnati Enquirer, as you say he did, and I've listened to those tapes twice.
He said they said, meaning the NCAA.
No. Oh, okay.
They said they got the news from the Cincinnati Enquirer clipping section.
Okay.
And that Ohio State, or no one with Ohio State, has ever turned him in. And then throughout the interview, he's saying they. And
you are once again assuming the Enquirer.
Well, certainly, because he is just, your noun is the Enquirer, and then he says they. They is a pronoun for the Enquirer staff.
You are assuming that, or you know that to be a fact?
Why is he saying here, why is he saying in this, what does he mean by they? I can't understand why we're getting this type of press. I think sensationalism in news is something, but I think they ought to really look into it a little deeper before they print it. Obviously, he is talking about a newspaper here. Presumably, since he has not mentioned the Cincinnati Post, he is talking about the Cincinnati Enquirer. It's just about a half a minute. It's just about a half a minute after that in the interview.
But Peter, the phrases that I keep hearing you use time and time again is apparently.
I said right here, I can only assume that the they Bruce meant are Enquirer reporters.
But how can you assume that?
Because he just said
Peter,
they.
Peter, your assumption goes on the pronoun they. That's the same kind of thing that started this whole mess.
Bob,
you went on the assumption. But you went on the assumption.
When you talked to Earl Bruce on Wednesday night, and when you asked me about, or when you gave me this quote, we have no responsibility to get the Enquirer out of trouble.
Absolutely.
You obviously think the Enquirer was in some trouble.
No. You sat right there in that chair, and you said he was wrong. He said the Enquirer mentioned that we turned in a Notre Dame, and we never mentioned Ohio State in any of our articles. And I said, Peter, I'm not here to get the Enquirer out of trouble.
Well,
I was
in my
a
mind,
specific response to what you asked me, not as it pertained to any articles that had appeared. And you know that.
well, I think,
Am I right or wrong?
I think that's semantics.
Once
Bob.
again, you assumed that I was talking about this article. That's not true. This whole thing's, my point, Peter, is Notre Dame, the NCAA, Ohio State, and all parties involved, including Gerry Faust, including us, and now including your editor and the Cincinnati Enquirer, have had to answer to one phrase, one paragraph that appeared in an article on October 24th, which I think is very, very poor reporting. And it says, Gerry Faust, rookie football coach, apparently. We've got assuming, we've got apparently, we've got all of these things, presuming. That's hardly the reason to possibly jeopardize Ohio State, Earl Bruce, Fred Zeckman, Gerry Faust, Peter King, Sports Talk, the Cincinnati Enquirer, Mr. Gibson, and everybody else.
Tell me
you are
how
going on
we are-
pure assumption.
Tell me how we are jeopardizing
The
all those
credibility of
people
all.
with the word apparently.
I go back to the initial statement I made to you. Whether they were right or wrong or guilty or innocent, the fact that you ask somebody to justify or to answer the charge, did you turn in Notre Dame to the NCAA? There is a certain amount of guilt
Okay, well,
with everybody.
in that
And you
case,
get to the point at the end of this article where we didn't do our homework. There's no homework to do. There's no story. There's no story whatsoever.
the story is that Gerry Faust gave a pep talk to his Moeller team.
And story ends. Now it is up to the NCAA to determine whether or not that's a
Right,
violation.
that's what we're reporting. Are we reporting
No,
in
you're
the
not
first
reporting.
story?
You're not reporting. You are apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule. You are judging Gerry Faust. And in the same article, you had a statement from the guy from the NCAA who says that it comes as a contact. There's no NCAA rule that says that you can't walk into the locker room. I mean,
But
the guy was trying.
he does say right now we are in an evaluation period. That means a
Does that-
college coach can go to a school and evaluate an athlete, ... but he cannot make a contact. Now, the whole issue here, and I assume the issue that the NCAA is going to have
There's
to...
that word again, Peter.
Okay. The NCAA, no doubt about it, is going to have to decide whether talking to a group of high school kids is a recruiting violation. All right. Now, by us reporting that fact does not mean that we are taking on Ohio State, taking on UC, taking on anybody. Bob, by this whole line of questioning, what you're trying to tell me is that because the Watergate Hotel was broken into in the early '70s, in the campaign race that year, that because the Washington Post asked questions, if you were an editor that day, you would have said, forget about it. All we have to go on is assumption. There are a lot of stories that start
Wait a minute,
small and
this-
end up big.
And that's what you were hoping for.
No, we have to check out every single story, Bob.
But the only thing is that in the Watergate situation, there's no final authority. In the NCAA
Oh yeah, there was a
situation,
final. The Supreme Court is the final
no,
authority.
the final authority as to what the rules and the regulations are, as to whether or not the President of the United States was wrong in what he did. There's no doubt that there was a break-in, but the association of Richard Nixon and those people, what I'm saying is there is a final authority.
There's no doubt
the
that there was a
NCAA.
pep talk.
We got a break for the news. We're going to be back to hear what you have to say out there in Greater Cincinnati land on Sports Talk on this particular situation. Peter King here from the Cincinnati Enquirer. We'll have an election update from our WLW news staff. We'll get a cold one, and we'll be back in 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
If you're calling long distance from Ohio, dial toll-free 1-800-582-1701. Calling out of state, dial 1-800-543-0471. And from Greater Cincinnati, 749-3420. Now, once again, Here's Bob Trumpy.
Thank you and welcome back to Sports Talk. Our final hour this evening, we have Peter King with us from the Cincinnati Enquirer, covering a very touchy subject as far as I am concerned. We try very, very desperately to do our homework on this program. We try each and every night to do our homework. And I want to make the point to Peter King that at the last line, which states, first of all, up in the article it said, Trumpy said, once again, it's an unfortunate situation where the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever. And if there is documentation, it appears to be the girlfriend of a friend of a friend of a friend who happened to attend a party. And that's not what you would call an inside source. I stand on that. And secondly, when we at Sports Talk have no responsibility to get the Enquirer out of trouble, that was a personal response to you, Peter, as you were sitting there in the chair after listening to the tapes. And your point is that you didn't do your homework before the Bruce interview. If you had, you wouldn't have said the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever. I repeat, we do our homework, and we do it diligently on this program with a staff of 3 people. We do the best we possibly can. And I believe that the way this entire incident started, with apparently a violation of an NCAA recruiting rule last week, in which he gave a locker room pep talk at the Moeller High School for the Moeller High School team. There's no reason to do any homework on this story, none whatsoever. I think the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I have to include the Cincinnati Post, made a story out of something that people love to read about. And I agree with Earl Bruce that there was sensationalism, and I believe that there was absolutely no documentation whatsoever to the story. And the proof of that is, you wrote this article on what, the 1st of November? The first article appeared on the 24th. It took you that long to get it straightened out.
Let me respond to one of your first statements there. When you say, when you say on the air, once again, it's an unfortunate situation where the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever, and it goes on. You were saying in that case that that there was a story printed and that there was no documentation. Now, you cannot point to me any story that we have written that there was no documentation
Well,
for.
certainly can.
We documented every fact that we wrote.
Throughout the entire thing, there is no documentation.
Bob, we have gone back and forth on this, and if you can show me a fact in here that is not documented, fine, I'll admit it.
The fact that no one turned Notre Dame in.
We reported it. We reported that in our Thursday paper.
Reported what? That no one turned them in?
We reported that no one turned them in, that the original report came from the Enquirer. Now, like I said in this story, that when you are not sure about the legality of an incident, this was a borderline incident. Whether or not talking to a locker room is a contact, you have to call the NCAA and check it out, because their rule book is not firm on that issue. So you have to check out your story.
But Peter, there was no documentation as to where the story came from. It could have been...
What difference? Gerry Faust admits that he did it. Gerry Faust admits that he goes into the locker room. The NCAA then admits that it might be a contact. Okay.
But the documentation I'm talking about is the fact that this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. Not that Gerry Faust made the pep talk. That's granted. He's willing to admit that, so is everybody else. But why the inclusion of the University of Cincinnati, Michigan, and trying to get a hold of Ohio State? I don't understand.
Very simply, I think, what I pointed to you when we were off the air, I think it showed that we were doing our job on Friday night when Irv Cupson out of the Sun-Times, whatever he is, I've never heard of the guy, when he prints a story that Ohio State did turn him in. So then it makes us look good for at least checking other universities to see if, hey, did you turn him in?
But it's not true.
Right. But Cupson had printed that this happened. Now, what I'm saying to you is that we have to check out all rumors, all information with things like this.
I believe not. I can't believe that you do that. I can't believe that we don't check out every rumor that comes in on this program.
Well,
and unfortunately, a lot of people listen.
We don't check out a rumor that when a drunk tells us in an alley that the Reds are going to trade George Foster for Neil Boitano, But we check out rumors. When Gerry Faust tells us that he made a pep talk, and I don't know exactly what he said to Randy, but knowing Gerry, he's probably kind of excited about it.
Well, let's go to the phones and see what the people out there have to say. All right. Good evening. Thank you for waiting. You're on Sports Talk with Peter King. Sorry to make you wait for so long.
Yeah, Bob, I think your whole conversation with Peter King is ridiculous. I just think, it's been a wasted hour and however long you've been on. I think for one thing, it was sensationalism when he wrote the article. I think that the fact that Gerry Faust came down to Cincinnati, that's documentation. It is documented. He did come down. He made the speech. Apparently, it could be a violation with the NCAA. It's a very minor violation if it is. And secondly, with you, you're making a big deal out of it, more than it really is.
You're probably right.
Simply because the fact that it was stated in the paper that you didn't do your homework.
I don't like that.
And I think it upsets you very much.
You damn betcha. I spend 11 hours a day here, and I do my homework, and I don't like anybody telling me I don't.
Yeah, it's just like an athlete in professional athletics. If he gets upset over everything that's written in the paper about him, he's going to be in a confrontation with a sports writer consistently. I think the best thing in this situation is to let the whole thing drop.
But I ask you this question. We sit here on Sports Talk, and we are judged by the people that call us. You have every right to call here and say anything you want about us, and we don't mind what you say. Within reason, we don't mind. But unfortunately, in this country of ours, you very seldom get a chance to take on a newspaper, to say anything about a newspaper, because they can throw letters to the editor in the trash can. I mean, I think this is an irresponsible job of reporting by the Cincinnati Enquirer, taking an absolute anthill, a very small anthill, and turning it into something that has been spread nationwide, and all because someone at a cocktail party was told by Gerry Faust that, and we don't know, he may have walked up desperately to Randy Holtz and said, my God, we may have violated a rule of the NCAA when I went in to speak at that pep talk. Or he could have walked up and said, I'm just wondering if speaking in front of my former team, if that might possibly be a violation of the NCAA rules. I mean, there are all kinds of innuendo that could be, but this is, from what I get it from this is a desperate situation. My major point in this situation, once I get by the fact that accused of doing no homework just grinds my teeth right down to nubs, is that how can you possibly, as a newspaper, assume so many things? Apparently a violation.
I don't think they assumed a whole lot, Bob. I think what they reported was basically true. I think you're saying they assumed a lot.
They assumed that someone may have turned them in.
We didn't assume
they didn't
that.
Assume that came out of the Chicago press.
Exactly. That's exactly right. We never printed that another school turned them in. Never printed it.
That came out of Chicago press. I think
guy's
the
right.
thing is, everybody's making too big a deal out of it. If it's a violation, the NCAA will slap Notre Dame's hand or whatever they're going to do to them. It's not that major of a violation.
Okay. Appreciate your comments. That's what we're here for.
Okay, and another thing, Bob, on Gerry Faust, somebody called you before and asked you what you thought was his greatest or his biggest adjustment when he went to South Bend. You were saying that he went in and he had to crack the whip. What do you mean by that?
Well, I believe when you go from high school, or actually you go from any school to Notre Dame, there was a certain aura about Notre Dame, and you, I believe in the recruiting season, heard Gerry Faust refer time and time again to the Notre Dame type of athlete. I think he went there assuming that all Notre Dame athletes were Gerry Faust type people, and that is they were gung-ho, they were run 1,000 miles an hour, get it done now, win one for the Gipper and all that stuff. I think when he got up there he found that they weren't all in fact like Gerry Faust, and that's when he had to get the whip out.
You know that for a fact, Bob, or is that just assumption on your part?
No, I believe it's more than assumption.
Then you know it as a fact.
Yes, I do.
You were told that by somebody close to the program.
Yes. Inside the program.
Then, you're saying that there wasn't the discipline in the program or the dedication in the program.
No, I'm not saying that there wasn't the discipline or the dedication. What I'm saying is that the former coach ran one way, and that wasn't the Gerry Faust way.
Yeah.
And he's got to go up there and tailor all the players to his way of thinking.
The only thing I say in that situation, I don't know if that was a big adjustment. I think the biggest adjustment that Gerry Faust had to make from going to Muller to Notre Dame is the situation that now he's equal with everybody. When he was in high school, he had a staff which was larger than everybody, and I'm a Notre Dame fan, a Gerry Faust fan, so I'm not, sour grapes or anything like that. But in a situation where in high school, he's got 10 coaches, and he coaches against Ray Backus at Elder. Ray's got 3 or 4.
I'm not sure that having the biggest coaching staff, though, parlays into having the most successful program.
Well, I think he had good quality coaches, and that's a credit to him.
Sure.
But when he goes to Notre Dame, now he's on the, when he looks across the sideline, he's not coaching against Ray Backus or Steve Rasso. He's coaching against Bo Schumbacher, who's been the mill a lot more than Gerry Faust. And I think what they're doing to Gerry, and I think he'll adjust to it and do a great job up there, But I think there in high school, Jerry did anything he wanted to do, just about to any team. First of all, he worked harder. He was more dedicated than any other high school coach that I know.
Okay, listen, I got to move on.
Okay.
Appreciate your comments.
Right.
Bye-bye. Good evening. Thank you for waiting. You're on WLW Sports Talk.
Yeah, Bob, this is Pat.
Yes, Pat.
And I've been waiting ever since Peter King got on.
Hi, Pat.
I don't think you're making too big a thing at all on this. They've reported it six different times in the paper.
What have we reported?
Time that we
Hey,
get a
hey,
chance
Pat,
to talk
Pat,
back to somebody like this.
Pat, what have we reported?
Oh, boy. From the very beginning,
Did we report that Ohio State reported Gerry Faust?
Well,
let's go back to the
you can pass that off, Peter, by simply saying, since the story was made public, there have been reports that an Ohio State assistant coach turned Faust into the NCAA, one published by a Chicago columnist. So you, in fact, did print in your paper a fact that someone else reported. That's
Right.
that's rumor.
All we're doing is
that's passing
Okay,
along
Bob,
a rumor.
Bob, all we're doing is asking that question to Earl Bruce, and Earl Bruce is responding to it. Now, what you're saying is that we shouldn't have printed this. Well, Earl Bruce's comments then defending the program would have made no sense if there's no lead into his quotes. I mean, the whole story in this story, which appeared after Earl Bruce appeared on Sports Talk, was that there have been reports that an Ohio State assistant coach turned Faust in. Well, what we're doing
But
now
now, wait a
is
minute.
letting Earl Bruce defend himself
But
against the remarks from a Chicago columnist.
The original column, though, appeared prior to Earl Bruce coming on the program, did it not?
Right.
Okay.
But it did not appear in our paper.
Yeah, later on it ended up in your paper. The rumor was passed along. Later on, Burst said, and he is the guy from the NCAA, he said he had several calls from media people in Columbus Wednesday, adding, I don't know what's going on in terms of newspaper people in Ohio, but that's the NCAA's only involvement. Burst said that the Chicago columnist report was not true. Why would you print something that simply was not true? It's stated by David Burst.
Because the Chicago Sun-Times printed it was true, the Cincinnati Post printed that it might have been true, and the Cincinnati Enquirer has to respond to those charges.
I would expect more.
We let David Burst say it's not true, then we let Earl Bruce say kibosh to the whole thing. We are doing our responsibility. We are letting them say that the story is not true.
All right, I think there's a great many people who disagree, but Pat, we don't want to leave you out of this conversation. This is your chance. Fire away.
Yeah, well, I think you have an extreme responsibility, Peter. I really do. You talk about
Hey, Pat.
About facsimiles. You talk about imagining. I've been listening to you. You're
Okay,
saying,
Pat.
I assume this. Let me show you a facsimile. I imagine this is what happened. And in the very beginning of your article, you said, now for the journalist side, please. And you're saying it's a boxing match, and you're bringing out the infancy in people. Where do you get off telling us that we're infants out here?
Pat, I'm not implying that you're an infant at all. I'm implying that about 20 people who called our paper after the Sports Talk show Wednesday night were going crazy against the Enquirer for something that we never did.
And why do you jump? Why can't the press be questioned?
Oh, we can be questioned. Bob is questioning me. He has a lot of very valid points.
That's right. Why is it that whenever the press is questioned for anything, no one can question you? You're the only people that can ever question anyone else's integrity.
Well, Pat,
nobody can question yours.
By the simple fact that Bob invited me here and asked me to defend ourselves, and he can make charges against me.
No, he's making charges. I don't even know the man, but he's not making charges. He's just...
I mean, well, okay. He is questioning. He's questioning my.
Your facts are not facts.
He's questioning.
Comparing apples to oranges. Even bringing Watergate into this is ridiculous. Watergate has nothing to do with Gerry Faust. And
Pat, can I explain something to you?
The word apparently should not be on the front page of the sport page if it's going to create this kind of a situation. You've got good men that you're talking about. You're talking about Gerry Faust, Earl Bruce. You're taking on Earl Bruce now just because he's questioned you.
Pat, let me tell you something. I never questioned Earl Bruce, and no one in our newspaper ever questioned Earl Bruce until after he appeared on the Sports Talk show. No one ever questioned. We never had Earl Bruce's name in our newspaper connected with the thing until Thursday. when Earl Bruce made responses to some charges made in the Chicago Sun-Times. And one other point that I think is valid. On Monday, Randy Holtz, one of our reporters, heard the same thing that was printed in the Chicago Sun-Times, that Ohio State indeed had turned in Gerry Faust.
From whom?
So Randy, he hears it in the Chicago Sun-Times.
No,
It's
no,
in the
you
Chicago Sun-Times.
said he heard it from somebody else, or you...
No,
you-
I'm saying Irv Kupcinet. All right.
I'm not sure. I mean...
Let me finish, okay?
All right.
He hears it from Irv Kupcinet that it was in the Chicago Sun-Times, so he checks it out. Now, Pat, we never printed anything after that because we could not reliably check out this rumor, so we did not print it. Now, that to me is responsible journalism. I think what Earl Bruce was trying to say is that we are sensational in this case. We are not. We never printed anything that we did not check.
Well, in the initial article, Peter, I go back to the initial article. The fact that the entire article starts out apparently and ends up somehow after the man from the NCAA says, no, it's not a violation to go in the locker room, but it can be possibly construed as a contact. How in the world does calling Michigan and trying to get a hold of somebody at Ohio State and calling the University of Cincinnati come out of that inquiry? I mean, you are assuming a great deal more than I think any newspaper in this country, including the Washington Post, and most assuredly the Cincinnati Enquirer, has the right to assume. And the problem is, I don't believe you pay any respect to those schools that have to answer this charge because of the guilt. You ask the University of Michigan, they say no. Well, why in the world would they call the University of Michigan to begin with? You ask the University of Cincinnati, that is assuming that someone may have in fact turned them in. That is something that everybody has to answer to, but why should they have to answer it to? You don't have any firm, hard facts. That the NCAA is in fact going to investigate this pep rally, this pep talk that Gerry Faust made in front of his former team.
And Peter, does that really deserve the front page of the sport page? The apparently is really what...
If Gerry Faust may have committed a rules violation,
apparently.
Gerry Faust
And
being...
so,
There's that word again.
front page.
There's that word again.
It was in the paper.
The
I know.
NCAA on Faust story was not from another school. It was really from the reporter. It's on C11. It's not on the front page. So you hide those in the other end of your paper. You don't put that kind of thing on the
What do we hide? What do we hide?
The tip to the NCAA on Faust talk, not from another school, by Dick Forbes.
We didn't find that out until Wednesday.
But she said that it was on page 11, not on the front page of the sports page.
The fact where he got the tip is where the NCAA got the tip is a minor point.
Minor point? It is the point.
It isn't the point.
There
Bob.
was no tip. They got the tip from you. No one has inquired to the
Okay, but
NCAA
Bob,
yet
let me-
as to whether it's legal or illegal for...
The violation is not someone turning him in. The violation is the deed. We reported that he made a pep talk to Moeller High School. That is a fact.
But Peter, what I said to you while we were doing commercial, because of the member institutions of the NCAA, until either Notre Dame or anybody else in the NCAA inquires officially to the NCAA, there is no violation.
So should we wait then for someone to turn him in?
I believe until you can substantiate that, first of all, there was some intent to break the rules by Gerry Faust. One. Secondly, that the story that you're talking about, I think it's better for you to run down the lack of truth in the Herb Kupcinet situation than it is to find out if someone else turned them in. That's the biggest point.
No, Bob, the biggest point in the whole story was written not... You see, the lead in the first story is not who turned him in. That is not the most important part of the story. The important part of the story is that there was, the NCAA says there was a contact made, and that contact could constitute a rules violation. Okay? Now, that is
I
the
thought
story.
in this country, though, that you were innocent until proven guilty.
Well, sure.
Reading by the first...
But I mean, does that mean we don't report a murder trial until he is convicted, the person who has done the murder?
No. If you want to report in the initial article, October 24th, Gerry Faust spoke in front of the Moeller High School football team. He spoke to a group. That's fine. You didn't report that. The first line I hear out of the Cincinnati Enquirer pertaining to this situation is, Notre Dame's rookie football coach apparently violated an NCAA recruiting rule that last week when he gave a locker room pep talk to the Moeller High School football team. You are assuming that.
We're not assuming it, Bob. We are going on a quote from the NCAA guy who says in the story that that you cannot make, or the rule book says that you cannot make contacts until December 1st. Gerry Faust has made a speech to a group of people. A contact, as I have said, is something more than just a wave or a nod or how are you. Gerry Faust made a full-blown pep talk. All right. Now there's a very good chance that he has made a
You
rule
are
violation.
assuming that the NCAA has not yet assumed that. Neither has
Assuming
anybody
what?
else in this country. That
Assuming
he
what?
has made a violation. That is only for the NCAA to decide. And the man told you in that article as to whether or not it's a violation. And this is really what perturbs me. Why is the headline and the first paragraph of the article written such a way, any question of a violation is up to the Committee on Infractions. First there would have to be an investigation, and then there would have to be action taken by the Infractions Committee. Nothing is a violation unless it is found by the Committee on Infractions. You assumed in the first paragraph that it was a violation.
Bob,
this guy's telling you it's not.
The headline you point to, you say Faust pep talk, possible violation.
There's
It is a possible violation.
Possible, assuming, apparently. That is hardly the basis for hard fact.
Bob, I go back to another example. If someone, I cover Xavier. If someone possibly commits a rule violation there, I'm going to report it. Obviously, I'm not going to wait until the NCAA finishes its entire investigation and then report it. That way, you're just waiting for the news. Here, we're jumping on the news. All right, we're doing our responsibility.
Excellent point that you make, and you jumped prematurely, and you jumped
We
with
didn't
no
jump
spring.
prematurely.
You most
Gerry
certainly
Faust
did.
admitted that Gerry Faust admitted that he made a pep talk. And what we write in here is that pep talk may be a violation of NCAA rules.
No, not maybe, apparently. Do
well,
they mean the same thing?
I think there's...
I think apparently it's a little more towards guilty than anything else. Pat, we've got other callers. I hate to cut you off.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, go right ahead.
In his article, he talks about being journalists, and I think perhaps they're reporters, but they've got a long way to be journalists. And I think this just proves the old adage, don't believe everything you read in the papers.
Thank you
very
Pat.
much, Bob.
Appreciate your phone call. All I can tell you is that I believe, since you brought up the Watergate situation, that prior to 1970, nothing like this would have happened. But now with Woodward and Bernstein and the fact that
Well, don't you think it's good that it happened?
You're always looking for deep throat. Yeah, but Peter, there has to be some cool heads prevail somewhere as to whether or not how much basically you can assume. And I believe the Enquirer and the Post, both situations, both papers assumed entirely too much. And it's now to the point where this is a bowl of spaghetti. It is woven so tightly that Ohio State's got to extricate its program from this situation, something that they're not anywhere close to being involved. None whatsoever. Earl Bruce called and was upset.
They have to extricate themselves because of a Chicago Sun-Times article, not because of a Cincinnati Enquirer article. You point to me in one of these articles before Bruce came on the show how he has to extricate himself from the Cincinnati Enquirer report.
The fact that the NCAA stated that they first found out about the violation from the Cincinnati Enquirer clipping section.
So why does Earl Bruce have to defend himself after
because
that?
After that, then the article by this Rona Barrett of Chicago, who can out of anywhere make the comment that Ohio State turned him in because Chicago is the absolute mecca for the Subway alumni. You would expect that comment out of a paper in Chicago.
Bob,
can't you temper that comment with the fact that he's from Chicago and every other person up there is a Notre Dame fan?
We had Irv Kupsinet's comments in here and Earl Bruce denying them. And David Burr saying that it wasn't true. Don't you think that that's proof enough that Earl Bruce has absolutely nothing to do with it? Earl Bruce has absolutely nothing to do with this whole story.
But he has to call the program here. He has to call our program.
Not because of something that was in our newspaper. That's my point.
The initial bit of information, I mean...
had nothing to do with Ohio State. The first story had nothing to do with Ohio State. Earl Bruce does not have any responsibility to call this show. He has a responsibility to call a show in Columbus.
Well, what is my responsibility if Earl Bruce has the wrong impression as to who is right or who is wrong, to take sides or to jump on Earl Bruce's back and say, hey, Earl, it wasn't the Enquirer, it was the Chicago Sun-Times.
Well,
where does my responsibility lie in this program?
Your responsibility is to be a totally objective reporter. And when you say...
Wrong. There is nothing objective about this program. Nothing.
Okay.
There never has been.
Then when you make accusations or when you make opinions about something that has happened and they're wrong, then you have to...
It proved to me how my opinion is wrong. There was no substantiation to the story.
Once again, it's an unfortunate situation where the story was apparently printed before there was any documentation whatsoever. And if there is documentation, it appears to be the girlfriend of a friend of a friend of a friend who happened to attend a party. And that's not what you would call an inside source.
I fail to see Cincinnati Enquirer mentioned anywhere in that.
Earl Bruce says that it's a girlfriend of a friend of a friend of an editor. A girlfriend of an editor, up higher in this story, of an Enquirer editor. All right. So now what you're saying here is that the Enquirer has made a story
Peter,
out of something that they have no documentation
Peter,
for.
once again, you are assuming that I am speaking only of the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Okay, tell me something, Bob. You say once again it's an unfortunate situation where the story was apparently printed. Okay, tell me what story.
3 stories in the Enquirer, 2 stories in the Post, and 1 article in the Chicago Sun-Times.
That says Ohio State did it? Did those Enquirer articles say Ohio State did it?
Why are you so... I'm talking about the entire thing. I'm talking about all the articles. The apparent violation by Gerry Faust in the initial article by you, the statement by Irv Kupson in Chicago, the statements by Bob Queenan, that the whole story from beginning to end is absolutely assuming and possibly and unquestionably and apparently and so on and so forth, apparently because of a friend of a friend of a friend. That is hardly a legitimate source.
Bob, when the Chicago Tribune reports that the White Sox are going to trade Greg Luzinski for George Foster, what do we do, in your mind?
Find out the source of that information.
It's a reporter. It's a reporter.
Let me...
It's a reporter
now,
who
Peter,
you
can't be that naive.
Gets it from a PR guy.
You cannot be that naive. John McNamara started the rumor in the World Series that Harry Dunlop was a candidate for the San Diego job. He started it personally. He started the rumor last year about Russ Nixon going to Boston.
How do you know?
How do I know? I have it on good authority.
There's your source. We have it on good authority that Luzinski's going for... I mean, that's just for example. Suppose we have it on good authority that they're going to trade Luzinski for Foster.
Who is your good authority on the fact that Ohio State turned in...
We never said it.
Notre Dame.
We never said it.
You did say it, Peter. It was stated in the article. Since the story was made public, there have been reports that an Ohio State assistant coach turned Faust into the NCAA, one published by a Chicago columnist. That doesn't get you off the hook, the fact that you put in there one published by a Chicago columnist.
Bob, as I said before, Earl Bruce is denying a report. David Burst is denying a report. What do you want us to say? Do you want us to say, in Columbus, Earl Bruce denied a report?
Basically, what I guess I want you to do is just simply look at this story, stand back far enough and say, you know what, this whole thing is trash. We can't do anything about this until the NCAA says, was it a violation or was it not a violation? We will make constant contact with the NCAA and find out exactly what is going to be the final determination. And until then, reporting all this garbage from Chicago, from here, from there, it makes no sense. I would expect more responsibility out of a paper the size of the Cincinnati Enquirer. I'll give you a chance to respond, but we've got to go to our election reports, and we'll be back after these messages also. Sports Talk here on WLW with Peter King. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to get back to the phones as quickly as we can. Good evening. Thanks for waiting. It's finally your turn on Sports Talk.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I'm interested in some of the comments made tonight, and I have a few opinions I'd like to state.
Please.
As of now, correct me if I'm wrong, but as of now, there has been no violation according to the NCAA. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, therefore, the stories have all dealt with rumored violations, and these...
Not rumored violations, possible violations.
Okay,
wait a minute.
Violations. The fact of the matter is that no one has been accused of anything by the NCAA.
Exactly. So what the gentleman said is correct.
Okay, my point then
is, in my opinion,
Mr. King may have a responsibility to investigate a rumored violation, but he does not have a responsibility to report a violation until someone has been accused by the NCAA. In my opinion, he has not demonstrated any journalistic integrity whatsoever. He said that he assumed that when Earl Bruce called, he was talking about him.
The Enquirer.
No,
the Enquirer.
That fact.
Yeah, the Enquirer.
Well, he mentioned the Enquirer, and then he mentioned the Enquirer, and then he used a string of several days.
Well, now wait a minute. The mention of the Enquirer was the way that the NCAA found out about it. Mm-hmm. Was the Enquirer newspaper clipping service. That was his mention of the Enquirer. No specific tie-in to what was written or whatever, but just the initial inquiry to the NCAA.
Well, when you
is
say
this a
the
violation?
Enquirer clipping service and then you say they, you assume the Enquirer, don't you?
There's that assumption again. I'm not
Bob,
sure
if
you
I
can.
if I say your wife and I say she, isn't that accurate?
How
I
soon
assume you're married to a woman.
yes, that is correct,
All
presently.
right, so I say she, then that's correct.
No, it's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, you're taking 30 seconds worth of comments by Earl Bruce out of your comments in the paper, and then saying that the they that he's referring to is specifically the Cincinnati Enquirer, when in fact I believe he's very upset with the Post, the Enquirer, and the Chicago Sun-Times, not really for what was written probably, but for more what was assumed, and that was that Ohio State may have in fact turned in Notre Dame.
If we assume that Ohio State turned in Notre Dame, then we would have printed it in Tuesday's paper after Randy Holtz made a thorough investigation. Randy Holtz makes a thorough investigation. He cannot find anything to back it up, so he doesn't print it.
Why wasn't that printed in the paper? Why wasn't the fact that he could not find... But it was never printed in the paper, Peter.
Holtz called Faust for a reaction, and the coach said he didn't...
You're talking about November 1st.
Bob,
You're talking about...
Bob, let me answer. Holtz called Faust for a reaction, and the coach said he didn't know if Ohio State turned him in. After several phone calls, Holtz decided he did not have a solid story, so he wrote nothing.
All right. When did that appear in the paper?
Sunday.
When did Randy Holtz make the phone calls?
Monday. What do you want us to write? Do you want us to write on Tuesday? Our reporter made some phone calls, but we could not establish that Ohio State turned him in. That's just what you don't...
Excellent.
Bob, we said that in Thursday's paper. If we can't establish...
Wait a minute, Peter. You're talking about Monday to Thursday to Sunday. That never appeared in the paper. Why is it not a story if he can't substantiate the things that were printed the previous week? That is, to me, as big a story as what you've already printed. I can't believe that.
We do not want to print rumor and innuendo without having some backing of it. All right? If we call people and they say, "Hey, look, we don't know what's going on," then we're not going to print. I mean, I could make some phone calls tomorrow about somebody buying a car for an athlete at Xavier, and they say, "Hey, did you buy a car?" And they say no, and then I'll print in the paper. You want me to print that he did not buy a car for the athlete at Xavier?
Peter, I cannot believe that after the man who initially started this investigation or this inquiry, Randy Holtz, when he makes the phone calls and cannot substantiate one bit of what he has heard, which has already once been in the paper, and that
it has not been in the paper that Ohio State turned him in. It has not been in the paper on Monday, so why should we print it on Tuesday?
And that's the only thing that he tried to substantiate.
Bob, I don't know.
Well, you're telling me that he couldn't find out anything that was worthy of a story.
Then why should we print a story if there's nothing worthy of a story?
It destroys the sensationalism of this story as it's set. The article...
No, it doesn't. We never said in the original article that Ohio State turned him in. So why should we print a denial that Ohio State turned him in?
Because it had already appeared in the Chicago paper. Why did you print it then on Thursday and allow...
Because it had gotten out of hand by then, Bob. It was in the Cincinnati Post on Tuesday saying that the latest speculation is that Fred Zekman, an OSU aide who has recruited Greater Cincinnati, may have had a hand in bringing the matter to NCAA. I think people are jumping on the Cincinnati Enquirer for something that the Enquirer didn't do.
I think that you're defending yourself in the face of a situation that I believe once started and handled poorly. You tried to get yourself out of it.
We didn't handle it poorly. We handled it professionally.
I believe there are a great many people out there who would disagree with that point, and I'm
Do they work for newspapers?
What difference does that make?
Have they studied journalism for 4 years?
What difference does that make?
I studied journalism for 4 years.
Do you only sell papers to people who study journalism?
No. Hey, look,
well, then what
Bob,
difference does it make?
do I host a sports talk show? No. I don't have the talent that you have.
David Broder...
Do I go build roofs? No, I don't.
David Broder may have a different opinion on this situation, but this gentleman is bringing up a very valid point. If Randy Holtz could not find any substantiation to the article that already appeared in the Chicago paper, that Ohio State had turned them in, why, in fact, was that not printed?
Well, according to what you said earlier in the program, just by mentioning someone, it makes them look bad. Like when we mention UC and Michigan, we're making them look bad.
You're telling
Why
me
should we mention Ohio State and make them look bad?
You're telling me your paper only spreads rumors, it doesn't stop rumors?
Bob, I think we stopped a rumor on Thursday in this paper.
You had a chance to do it on Tuesday. Why did you wait 2 more days?
Bob, suppose you can get a hold of 5 people.
Are you going to answer my question?
What did you say?
I said, You had a chance to either substantiate the rumor or kill the rumor on Tuesday. Randy Holtz could not substantiate anything that was printed by Irv Kupcinet in the paper in Chicago on Monday. Why did you wait until Thursday?
Obviously, because we're still checking on the story. And let me ask you, tell you another
you just
thing.
told me he checked out the story and could not find out anything.
Okay,
Why is that not worthy of an article if, to
Bob,
start it out, you can say apparently? Why can't Randy Holtz look at
Randy Holtz was not questioning that Gerry Faust did something. He was questioning whether a school had turned him in.
Listen, we got about a minute to go here. We've got 8 lines filled. We're going to continue the Sports Talk program for a little bit. I have no idea how long. But once again, I want as many people out there to give a chance for their opinions on this situation as possible. And hopefully Peter and I will say less and you people can say more. Stay with us, will you? What do we do? Keep going? Line 5, you're still on. Let's listen. Go ahead. Are you still there?
Yes.
Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'd like to make a point that Peter King's comments the entire evening have been prefaced by probably, possibly, apparently, and I assume. Now, it's my opinion that if he doesn't have facts that he can state as facts, that he should not have reported anything until he checked out those rumors and proved them to be facts or false comments.
I guess I just don't speak well on the radio.
I don't think you write very well in the paper either.
Thank you.
Appreciate your phone call.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good evening. Thank you for waiting. You're on WLW Sports Talk with Peter King.
Yeah, Bob?
Hello.
My name is Rick, and the guy that just got on the phone there and says apparently this, that, all those words, those are newspaper words. And if you can't get that through your head, something's wrong. When a guy says apparently this, or I assume this, now when you assume, you're going to pay the dues, but this guy made a statement in the paper. He puts apparently this. Now, if you got common sense and you know anything about journalism, which I don't, but when I read something like that, apparently, well, I take it for what it is, apparently. Now, later on, if the story does come out, if it's true or false, they usually come out and they'll say, this is fact. Okay? Now, I don't see anything wrong with what that guy had to say, but what I will have to say, Bob, is I think you've lost your objectivity on this radio show. There's people like us that sit back here and wait an hour to hear, to talk. And you go on, I think you've got this thing, a personal thing, that came out against you or your radio show, and I think you brought this thing to a point, and this poor guy's sitting there, and he can't really say nothing. He can say it in writing. He can definitely say it in writing what he thinks about this and write about that, but you're at an advantage, Bob.
How am I at an advantage?
Yeah, you're at an advantage because you've been used to sitting on a sports show, and you can talk.
Well, one of the things that I've been accused of, one of the things that I personally have been accused of is not doing my homework. I'm saying here on this Sports Talk program that you don't have a backspace. You don't have the quiet solitude of a sports office where you can sit and look at research books. You got to kind of wing it.
Well, Bob, I can understand you being upset about that point.
You're damn right I'm upset, but I'm more upset about my biggest source of information for this program is sports pages of various papers from around the country.
Yeah,
I am now faced with a situation where what can I believe in the Cincinnati Enquirer?
Wait, Bob, let's back off now a little bit. Now, I've heard you made statements over the line. Apparently, you've heard this. Apparently, I've heard you say that occasionally, Bob.
Occasionally, yes.
Okay, but you say it, Bob.
But more times than not, you will hear me say, in my opinion.
Okay,
I am not afraid.
Okay, either way, Bob.
That is
I don't think
more.
a reporter can say, in my opinion, or apparently, assume. Now, I do know this, that when you assume, if you write the word out, you make an ass out of you and me. And that's what usually happens when you do assume. But on this show, Bob, we've sat here and watched you for an hour and a half. I'm sitting here listening to you, Bob, for an hour and a half. Take this guy apart, and I'm not... Hey, this guy's writing the story, what he heard. Now, I will say, hey, I don't know the whole story, and if it was a violation, okay, he gets slapped on the wrist. So what? So what? Now, if you feel that your integrity has been challenged by the Enquirer, then you have a point, and a valid point, a very good valid point, because your integrity and your sports show means a lot to you, Bob. There's nothing wrong with it.
Doesn't your integrity...
He's up for 2.5 hours beating this guy down. He's doing a job. He can't talk on the... Hey, he doesn't really have an opportunity because, Bob, for the last half hour, you've been emotionally involved in this whole damn thing.
I've been emotionally involved for about the last week.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's the shows on your show, Bob.
But this is your chance to talk about. Obviously, you agree with Peter King's.
I'm not saying. In other words,
just listen for a minute. You agree?
You don't know anything about journalism, Bob. You may think you do, but you don't.
I never professed to know anything about journalism.
Well, then give this guy, give him credit for his profession. He does know his profession, how to write.
I would certainly grant him that, or he wouldn't be writing
like that, Bob. You're doing him an injustice.
I would certainly assume that he knows something about journalism, or he would not be writing at the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Okay, I'm going to
I have to presume that.
You just use that word assume.
No, presume.
Huh?
Presume. I presume he knows something about.
I'm sorry.
Only because he works at the Cincinnati Enquirer.
This show is a sports talk show.
And this is sports.
On taking this guy down.
And this is sports, my friend. This is sports. I appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Thanks for your phone call. Where we go from here, Douglas? All right, this is WLW Radio in Cincinnati, the sports voice of the Midwest. 700 on your dial.